History leaves behind more than answers. It leaves contradictions, artifacts that don't belong, that surface in the wrong place at the wrong time, with meanings no one can fully explain. These objects don't fill gaps in the timeline, they widen them. An ancient scroll reveals a temple built far from its holy center. A colossal statue guards a forgotten capital, its purpose carved but never explained. A rebel's fortune resurfaces beneath a river centuries after it vanished. A man walks the same path for decades, nameless, unrecorded. A noblewoman's body emerges soft and uncorrupted, untouched by time. A mountaintop stone holds the sun in place with precision that outlived the empire that made it. And in the earth beneath Anatolia, a woman sits on a throne older than writing, watching silently across 9,000 years. None of these were meant to survive, but they did. Not to affirm the stories we tell, but to interrupt them. In 1906, a team of German archaeologists began excavating Elephantine Island, a narrow strip of land in the Nile near Aswan. Amid the ruins of a Persian military outpost, they uncovered something astonishing. Not statues or gold, but words. Dozens of papyrus scrolls and leather fragments lay buried in the sand, some folded, others rolled or torn. Written in Imperial Aramaic, the administrative language of the Achaemenid Empire, the documents had survived 2.5 millennia, thanks to Egypt's dry heat and protective layers of collapsed architecture. These would become known as the Elephantine Papyri. What they revealed was not a footnote to Jewish history, but a contradiction. In the 5th century BCE, long after the destruction of Solomon's temple, and while the Second Temple was being built in Jerusalem, a Jewish community lived and worshipped on Elephantine. These were not merely merchants or scattered exiles, they were organized, literate, and deeply rooted. Many had likely descended from Jewish mercenaries brought by the Egyptians or Persians to garrison Egypt's vulnerable southern frontier, and they had brought their religion with them. The papyri, over 200 documents now housed in museums across Berlin, Cairo, and New York, paint a picture of a thriving, autonomous Jewish population. They had families, owned property, settled disputes through written contracts. But what stood out most was their temple, not a metaphorical temple or a small gathering place, but a full-scale sanctuary with altars for animal sacrifice, a roster of priests and formal religious rituals. The letters mention regular offerings of rams, incense, and grain. They speak of sacred festivals and a structure dedicated to YHW, a form of the divine name associated with Yahweh. Just meters away stood a temple to Khnum, the ram-headed Egyptian god of creation. The two shrines coexisted, peacefully at times, tensely at others. That tension came to a head in 410 BCE, when a riot broke out, and Egyptian priests allegedly incited the destruction of the Jewish temple. In the aftermath, the Jewish residents penned desperate letters to Bagoas, the Persian governor of Judah, and to the high priest in Jerusalem, requesting permission and funds to rebuild. The letters were formal, diplomatic, and urgent. They outlined the loss and expressed loyalty to the empire. But if a reply was ever sent, it has never been found. What makes the Elephantine Temple so controversial is not just its existence, but what it lacked. The community made no mention of the Torah. Their religious observance, while clearly centered on the God of Israel, showed no evidence of the legal restrictions that would later define mainstream Judaism. There was no recorded objection to building a temple outside Jerusalem, no indication that multiple sanctuaries were considered inappropriate. Their tone was not defiant, but matter-of-fact, as if their way of life was neither aberrant nor unorthodox, just another thread in the fabric of Jewish identity. This has fueled intense scholarly debate. Some argue that the Elephantine Jews preserved an older form of Israelite religion, untouched by the centralizing reforms that followed the Babylonian exile. Others believe they were simply adapting, modifying traditions to fit life under Persian rule in a multicultural garrison town. The silence from Jerusalem, whether political, theological, or accidental, has become as significant as the letters themselves. There's also the matter of the temple's fate. By the late 4th century BCE, it vanished from record. Whether it was dismantled under orders or slowly abandoned is unknown. No trace of the structure has been found, only the texts survive. But those texts, written in steady, practiced hands on sheets of papyrus, carry the weight of a forgotten chapter. They show that Judaism, in its formative centuries, was far from uniform, that sacred spaces existed outside the land of Israel, that theology, once fluid, later hardened into orthodoxy. The Elephantine Papyri aren't a footnote, they're a reminder that the past is rarely neat. And while these records spoke softly through ink and parchment, the next enigma would roar in silence, guarding lost cities with wings of stone and the faces of men. The ground cracked open beneath the Mesopotamian sun, and from it rose a face that wasn't meant to be seen again. In 1843, French consul and archaeologist Paul-Émile Botta stood before a monumental figure emerging from the earth near the village of Khorsabad in northern Iraq. At first, he thought he had found Nineveh. In truth, he had uncovered the long-lost capital of King Sargon II, Dur-Sharrukin, the fortress of Sargon. The city had been forgotten for over 2 millennia, but the statues had waited. Towering more than 4 meters tall and carved from solid gypsum, the creatures were like nothing else in the ancient world. Each had the body of a bull or lion, the wings of an eagle, and the face of a man crowned with a horned cap, an embodiment of strength, swiftness, vision, and divine authority. These were Lamassu, the great protective spirits of the Assyrian Empire. Installed at the entrances of palaces and citadels, they did not kneel or bow. They stood, frozen mid-step, silently commanding respect from all who passed beneath them. Botta's team uncovered them buried in collapsed palace gates, half submerged in layers of debris. They were not alone. Chambers of relief carvings, inscriptions and broken statues surrounded them, remnants of a city that had never fulfilled its purpose. Dur-Sharrukin had been built rapidly under Sargon II's reign and was intended as a symbol of imperial power. But when the king died in battle in 705 BCE, the capital was abandoned. The Lamassu, placed so carefully at its gates, remained to guard nothing but dust. Dozens of Lamassu have been recovered from sites like Dur-Sharrukin, Nineveh, and Nimrud. Most appear in nearly identical poses: front-facing heads, 5 legs to suggest motion, symmetrical wings, stylized beards. Inscriptions carved along their flanks invoked blessings and curses, calling on gods to protect the palace while threatening destruction upon any who would harm it. Despite their consistency, no ancient record explains why this specific form, part animal, part bird, part man, was so obsessively repeated. Theories abound. Some scholars view the Lamassu as spiritual guardians, adapted from earlier Sumerian and Akkadian beliefs. Others see them as political tools, living metaphors of empire, designed to inspire awe and suppress rebellion. Their silence has kept the answer just beyond reach. In the 19th century, several of the recovered Lamassu were transported to Europe. Botta sent some to the Louvre in Paris, where they still stand today. More followed. One pair now resides in the British Museum, another in the Oriental Institute of Chicago. Transporting them was an ordeal of ingenuity. Teams used sledges, barges, and reinforced crates to move these 20-ton blocks of history across continents. Others remained in Iraq, some protected, many not. In 2015, the world watched in horror as extremist militants released footage of Lamassu being destroyed in the ruins of Nineveh. It wasn't just an act of vandalism, it was the deliberate erasure of a voice that had endured for 2,700 years without speaking a word. Even in ruin, they persist. Their broken wings and weathered faces continue to provoke unease and fascination. To stand before one, whether in a museum or amid ruins, is to feel the weight of a civilization that engineered myth into architecture. The Lamassu do not tell stories. They occupy space. Their forms endure, not to be understood, but to be endured. In another land, across centuries and empires, a different kind of mystery would surface, not carved in stone, but scattered in gold, glinting beneath the silt of a restless Chinese river. The first object came up in the bucket of a mechanical dredger, dull at first, then flashing gold in the light. It was 2016, and crews working on a riverbank restoration project near Pengshan in China's Sichuan province had disturbed something buried for centuries. What followed would become one of the most significant treasure finds in modern Chinese archaeology. The muddy bed of the Min River had been hiding a royal hoard, lost, forgotten, and scattered across nearly 500 square meters of submerged silt. As soon as word reached the Sichuan Provincial Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology, the site was sealed off. Over the next months, archaeologists waded into the cold, murky waters to begin an excavation unlike any other. Visibility was near zero. Divers worked by touch, guided by sonar, inching through sediment that shifted with every current. Pump systems had to be installed to manage the river flow, creating brief windows of access between seasonal floods. And with every scoop of earth, the story grew. Gold ingots stamped with the seals of the Ming and Qing dynasties, bronze tiger-shaped belt hooks inlaid with silver, blades forged for ceremony, not war, a solid gold mask beaten thin, still bearing the impression of a face long gone. Over 50,000 items have been recovered so far, artifacts of staggering variety and craftsmanship, many ritually bent or broken, as if deliberately made unusable before burial or loss. The origin of this submerged trove is tied to the violent collapse of a kingdom that barely existed. In the mid-17th century, rebel general Zhang Xianzhong declared himself ruler of Sichuan during the chaos of the Ming-Qing transition. His rule was brief, beginning in 1644 and ending violently just 2 years later. Contemporary records describe him as ruthless, his rule marked by massacres and fear. As Qing forces advanced, Zhang attempted to flee Chengdu with his treasury. Somewhere near the Min River, his convoy was attacked or caught in the shifting terrain. The treasure, loaded into barges or carts, vanished into the water. Zhang himself was killed shortly after by Qing troops. His body was displayed, his rebellion extinguished. No map of the hoard was ever found, no inventory survived. For generations, only river legends remained, until the Min began to give back what it had taken. The debate over the treasure's meaning continues. Some scholars argue that these were simply looted goods, plunder from temples and nobles gathered in haste. Others believe the items show a deliberate effort at state building, reflecting a short-lived court that mimicked the visual glamour of imperial power. The presence of foreign silver coins and imported jade suggests trade and long-distance acquisition, but no definitive interpretation has emerged. The items speak, but not clearly. Today, many of the recovered artifacts are held at the Jinsha Site Museum in Chengdu and in national collections across China. Conservation work continues in secure labs, where soil samples and microabrasions are studied to determine origin, method, and intent. Each piece adds to a picture that remains incomplete: a court in exile, a fortune on the run, a river that swallowed it all without a trace of ceremony. The River of Gold remains an active site, but its message is frozen in the moment of collapse. Zhang's ambition died with him. His name survives only in footnotes and folklore, but the treasure, bent, buried, and broken, remains defiantly intact. And while fortune slipped beneath the river's skin, another mystery was taking shape, not in gold or stone, but in leather and silence. A man who walked without name, leaving behind no words, only a path. He was first seen in the mid-19th century, walking alone along the country roads of Connecticut and New York, always in the same direction, always at the same pace. His path formed a loop, 585 kilometers long, through forests, past farms, and between towns. He stopped at the same places, spoke little beyond polite nods, and wore a suit made entirely of hand-stitched leather. To those who came to expect his monthly visits, he became known only as the Leatherman. No one ever knew his name. He never revealed his origin, his language, or his reason. He spoke in brief, broken English and fragments of French. He accepted food and tobacco but refused shelter. In winter, he trudged through snow in his heavy outfit. In summer, he baked under its weight. He slept in caves and rock shelters. More than 20 of them have since been identified across his circuit, many still referred to as Leatherman caves. Over the decades, his presence became so regular that townspeople would leave meals for him on porches, certain he would pass by again within the same week, year after year. He died in 1889, found in one of his caves near Ossining, New York. His body was discovered by a local farmer, lying on a bed of leaves, his leather garments still intact. With no known relatives, he was buried in a pauper's grave in Sparta Cemetery, beneath a simple stone that read, "Final Resting Place of the Leatherman, 1889. But the mystery didn't end there. Over the years, the Leatherman's life drew the attention of researchers, folklorists, and amateur historians. Some speculated he was a French-Canadian displaced by trauma. Others believed he had suffered a breakdown or exile following personal tragedy. A few theorized he was fleeing political unrest in Europe or religious persecution. Still, nothing was proven. He left no letters, no journals, no explanation. In 2011, more than a century after his death, researchers from the Connecticut State Archaeologist's Office exhumed his grave, hoping that modern forensic science might finally give him a name. But when the coffin was opened, they found almost nothing. The wooden box had decayed. The remains had disintegrated. All that was recovered were a few coffin nails, a leather fragment, and soil. DNA testing was impossible. Alongside his body had been buried a small set of hand-forged tools, simple but precise: a sharpening stone, pieces of wire, metal scraps shaped into hooks. These objects were preserved and analyzed, showing wear consistent with years of maintenance and use. It became clear that the Leatherman didn't just wear leather. He had made and repaired it himself, crafting his clothing and gear from salvaged materials, living by a knowledge no longer common in industrial America. Though no answers emerged from the exhumation, public interest grew. His grave was moved slightly to meet state regulations, and a new marker was placed, one that no longer claims to know what lies beneath. In a country where identity is everything, the Leatherman defied it. He walked without flag or story, untouched by war, politics, or wealth. His route remains mapped and marked by others, but the man himself has vanished, not into legend, but into quiet, unresolvable fact. And as his boots traced the same forgotten paths, far across the sea, another form of preservation was taking place, this time in silence, darkness, and an airtight tomb. In the summer of 1971, as Cold War tensions pushed China to expand its network of air raid shelters, a crew of laborers dug into a hillside near the city of Changsha in Hunan province. Their shovels struck an unusual barrier, dense layers of white clay and charcoal, precisely arranged in alternating sections. As they removed the topsoil, they revealed a man-made mound unlike any other. The authorities were called. Within days, a team from the Hunan Provincial Museum and state archaeologists had secured the site. What they uncovered beneath the earth would rewrite the possibilities of preservation. The tomb belonged to Xinjui, the Marchioness of Dai, wife of a local nobleman during the Western Han dynasty. Her burial chamber, later identified as Tomb Number 1 at Mawangdui, had remained sealed for over 2,000 years. Workers entered through a narrow trench and found a deep vertical shaft leading to a wooden structure lined with thick lacquered walls. Inside were 4 nested coffins, each one more elaborate, until they reached the core, a pitch-dark, airless chamber filled with scentless fluid and soft silk. When they opened the final coffin, what lay inside stunned even the most experienced members of the team. The body of Lady Di had not decomposed. Her skin was still elastic. Her veins still held traces of blood. Her limbs could still bend. The preservation was so complete that modern physicians performed a full autopsy, discovering she had suffered from high cholesterol, arteriosclerosis, and a likely fatal heart attack. Melon seeds in her stomach revealed her last meal. More than 1,000 artifacts were found alongside her. Among them, an ornate silk banner illustrating her journey to the afterlife, a cosmetic case filled with oils, combs, and powders, lacquered trays of food sealed in airtight vessels, and tightly folded silk robes still patterned with intricate dye. Musical instruments, including a 7-stringed chin, were stored nearby, and small figurines hinted at court life, servants, and ritual observances. Every item had been placed deliberately, not just for display, but to accompany her beyond death. The tomb's construction was a marvel of ancient engineering. Archaeologists believe the alternating clay and charcoal layers created a vacuum-sealed environment. Combined with the absence of oxygen, constant humidity, and the mysterious reddish embalming fluid, the conditions halted decay entirely. No modern method has replicated the results, although other Han tombs exist, including those of her husband and son nearby. None have yielded a body so well preserved. This extraordinary effort reflects early Han beliefs in life after death, physical continuity, and bodily wholeness. The dynasty embraced notions of spiritual ascent and longevity, and the material culture of Lady Di's tomb shows a concerted attempt to merge luxury, ritual, and science. Her body was not only meant to rest, it was meant to endure. The discovery, announced at the height of China's Cultural Revolution, quickly drew international attention. Scientists from China, Japan, and the West requested access. Museums prepared exhibitions. For a time, Lady Di became a symbol of ancient Chinese sophistication, drawing enormous crowds to the Hunan Provincial Museum, where her nested coffins and burial goods are still displayed. The body itself remains under tight conservation, visible only to specialists in controlled conditions. Exposure to air could undo what 2,000 years had miraculously preserved. Even today, Lady Di remains a scientific puzzle. No bacteria were found in her body. No known preservative matches the fluid that encased her. Forensic studies continue, but the conditions that created her state have never been reproduced. She is not embalmed. She is not mummified. She is simply whole. She was not an empress. She did not rule, yet her tomb surpassed the grandeur of kings, not in gold or conquest, but in defying death itself. And while she lay untouched in lacquered silence, high in the Andean mountains, another monument was carved not for preservation, but to hold the sun itself in place. The jungle had kept its secret for centuries. Hidden among the Andean ridges, Machu Picchu stood wrapped in cloud and stone, untouched by conquest and unknown to the outside world. It wasn't until 1911, when Yale professor Hiram Bingham followed local guides into the mountains of Peru, that the world began to learn of the city in the sky and the carved monolith that lay at its heart, the Intihuatana stone. It rises from the mountain itself, hewn from bedrock with geometric precision. The base block is broad and angular, its planes aligned with the cardinal points. From it juts a short vertical spike, chiseled, not sculpted, measuring just under 1 meter in height. The surface is weathered but unbroken. Its edges are crisp, its corners deliberate. Pale grey in color, the stone glows white under midday sun and shifts to silver in the thin mountain mist. From a distance it appears understated. Up close it becomes undeniable. The name Intihuatana, meaning hitching post of the sun in Quechua, was not given by the Inca, but by later scholars trying to interpret its role. Yet the term captures something of its purpose. On the equinoxes, the sun stands directly overhead, casting no shadow from the central pillar, an optical stillness that ancient priests may have used to mark balance in the solar calendar. At sunrise and sunset during solstices, the stone aligns with the surrounding peaks, particularly Huayna Picchu and Salcantay, echoing celestial events in stone geometry. But the Intihuatana was more than a solar tool. Its placement at the highest ceremonial platform suggests spiritual importance beyond astronomy. Nearby lie the Temple of the Sun, ritual baths, and finely worked shrines, each arranged as part of a cosmological design. The stone may have served as a conduit for sacred rites, anchoring time and space, connecting the heavens to the Inca state's divine mandate. No inscriptions remain, but its form alone implies deep symbolic intent. Locals in the region had long known of Machu Picchu's existence. Quechua families grazed livestock along the terraces. To them, the site was not a lost city. It was a sacred space hidden from conquest. Oral tradition held that powerful stones remained there, left untouched by Spanish hands. When Bingham arrived, he did not discover Machu Picchu, but reintroduced it to the world outside Peru. The Intihuatana, unlike others destroyed by colonial forces, had survived because of the mountain's isolation. Modern visitors often speak of a strange calm surrounding the stone. Some say compasses waver near its base. Others describe a hum in the air, a silence that deepens rather than empties. The surrounding platform, cut into terraces and stepped walls, frames the sky like a ritual theater. The view is vast. Cloud forests unfolding in every direction, peaks wrapped in mist, the valley yawning below like a forgotten axis. In 2000, a crane fell during the filming of a commercial at Machu Picchu, chipping the Intihuatana's upper edge. The damage, though repaired, provoked outrage. It was not just a scar on stone, it was a violation of something far older than concrete or camera. Today, archaeologists and archaeoastronomers continue to study the site using solar simulations and GPS-based surveys. The stone's angles and alignments hint at knowledge more advanced than previously assumed, yet its purpose resists full classification. It is not a sundial in the modern sense. It is not a mere monument. It stands somewhere between function and ritual, science and spirit. To this day, the Intihuatana remains one of the few Inca ritual stones left in situ, untouched in its original position. It speaks not through language or symbol, but through form, carved meaning held in silence. And while this stone stood in sunlight at the roof of an empire, another form was taking shape far below, carved not from rock, but shaped by hand, seated on a throne older than writing itself. Beneath the dusty plains of central Turkey, a low, unassuming mound rises from the Konya Plain. For centuries, it was dismissed as just another hill, but beginning in the 1950s, archaeologist James Mellart led excavations that peeled back the layers of time at Çatalhöyük, revealing an ancient settlement that redefined the story of early human civilization. Densely packed mud brick homes formed a city with no streets, no temples, and no visible hierarchy. Yet its people painted murals, buried their dead beneath floors, and filled their rooms with symbolic objects crafted by hand. In 1961, within the fill of a collapsed domestic structure, a broken figurine was recovered from near a storage alcove, covered gently by refuse, but unmistakably intentional in its placement. Just 17 centimeters tall, the seated woman of Çatalhöyük is shaped from baked clay and fired to a warm reddish hue. She sits with poise on a throne flanked by 2 leopards or panthers, powerful creatures rendered with muscular haunches and open jaws. Her form is broad, rounded, and confident. She wears no crown, carries no tool, and speaks with no inscription. yet she projects the calm authority of something revered. Unlike many Neolithic female figurines that are abstract or symbolic, she is composed with balance, grounded in gesture as if observing more than ruling. This was not the only figurine found at Çatalhöyük. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of clay figures, mostly fragmented, often female, many depicting pregnancy or exaggerated fertility, but most are small, palm-sized, and lack the formal throne or animal attendants that define this piece. In that, she stands apart. She is singular not in presence alone, but in intention. Originally interpreted by Melart and others as a mother goddess, the figure was believed to reflect a matriarchal or fertility-based religion. But in recent decades, scholars have stepped back from that conclusion. There is no central temple at Çatalhöyük, no altar where such figures were enshrined. Many were found discarded in refuse pits or casually placed in storage areas, not shrines. Some now argue that the figurines represent ancestors, protective spirits, or communal ideals, personal rather than divine, symbolic rather than worshipped. The seated woman's find spot suggests deliberate concealment, possibly a retirement or deposition rather than active use. She was broken in several places. Whether intentionally or by collapse remains unclear, but her symbolism is difficult to dismiss. The throne, the leopards, the upright posture, these are markers of formal power, not domestic routine. Çatalhöyük itself complicates every theory. The settlement lasted over a millennium, and throughout its layers, no signs of kings, warriors, or class divisions emerge. Homes are roughly equal in size and contents. Burials cross age, sex, and status lines. Yet into this flat social landscape, someone shaped and placed a woman on a throne. Today, the site of Çatalhöyük is protected by a weathered roof of steel and canvas. Pathways wind between open excavation pits, and visitors walk past mud brick walls shaped by hands that predate writing by thousands of years. The figurine, now carefully preserved and displayed at the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations in Ankara, no longer rests in the shadows of grain bins and hearths. It sits beneath glass, still poised, still silent. No name is known for her, no script survives from her world, but she remains one of the oldest sculpted symbols of power, expression, and intention humanity has ever left behind. These artifacts weren't meant to last forever, yet they did. A temple far from its sacred center, guardians of stone whose purpose was never written down. Gold scattered by retreat, a man who walked without a name, a body that refused to decay, a stone that held the sun, and a woman seated before writing itself began. They weren't left behind to explain the past. They were made to hold meaning, and in that silence, unchanged across centuries, they still do. If you enjoyed this journey through the unknown, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others who seek the strange corners of history. We'd love to hear what artifact intrigued you most. Feel free to leave a comment below. And when you're ready, there's more waiting. Explore our other videos where the past still speaks, just not always in words.